Welcome back. What happens when the church in America has lost authority to change the culture and instead becomes it? Well, I'll show you. Take a look. Wow. Now, just to clarify, the performance you just watched came from a church. Yes, Crossroads Mega Church in Cincinnati, Ohio. Apparently, the pastor there thought it would be fun to interrupt last Sunday's sermon for a Super Bowl-themed halftime show in which secular songs were performed and the pastor swung from a wrecking ball as a tribute to Miley Cyrus. Gee, so much for the church being holy ground. I mean, come on, this is heartbreaking. To see the church go on about literally everything except repent and be born again. Clearly, there is no reverence nor fear of God here. Joining us now to discuss, senior pastor at Rock Harbor Church, Pastor Brandon Holthaus. Pastor Brandon, thanks so much for being with us. It's great to see you.
Hey, good to see you, Allison.
Thank you. So, wow, Pastor Brandon, I think it's just so sad to see this. What is your initial reaction to this just abomination happening within the church?
Well, there's two things, shock and then I'm not shocked. I mean, I thought I'd seen everything, but a pastor swinging on a wrecking ball, that's a new one for me.
Yeah.
But I guess it's equivalent to the drag queen pastors we're now seeing in the churches as well. So what we have to understand from a theological standpoint is Jesus had warned us a long time ago that the church would be infiltrated. And during the last days, the church would go into apostasy. And that's what we're seeing, Allison, is the predicted apostasy that the hirelings would infiltrate. They have made their way in. And these came from, the warnings that Jesus said in the parable of the wheat and the tares, the parable of the mustard tree where the birds infiltrated, and then the parable of the 3 loaves where the woman introduces leaven into the loaves. So Jesus warned that this would happen. And now the problem is, these hirelings have allowed the culture to infiltrate the church, allowed the morals of the to infiltrate the church, and the methodologies. So when you confront these guys about what they're doing, they're just going to turn around. Well, this is for evangelism purposes. This is to reach the lost. And the stats prove differently. They never reach anybody. No. The church becomes a mile wide and an inch deep, and you don't see true conversions. You don't see true discipleship. And it's a disaster. So that's what we're seeing.
I'm totally with you, and I believe it wholeheartedly. We are called to be different, and this is just really no different than conforming with the world. It's just so upsetting to see. Now, continuing on with everything you just mentioned there, I do have to say I am happy to see there are still cardinals challenging the woke ideology coming out of the Vatican.
Yeah.
But Pastor Brandon, isn't this a larger problem affecting both Catholics and Protestants? I mean, I know there are a number of mainline Protestant denominations, like you mentioned, that are embracing, so-called gender-affirming wokeness and are outright displaying the LGBT flag prominently both inside and outside their churches. I mean, aren't churches supposed to represent biblical living instead of embracing the depravity of the world?
You're totally right. And you're absolutely right about the Pope. The Pope obviously is a globalist. There's no doubt about that. And he's pushing that through the Vatican into the Catholic Church. But you're totally right. The Protestant church has the same problem. And what happened, Allison, is during the lockdowns, something happened spiritually that I can't explain other than a spiritual reality, that these pastors who stayed locked down came back and are now woke all of a sudden. Yeah. And it's not just in America, Protestantism. I've been traveling. I just got back from Australia and New Zealand preaching there. And then I was in Europe last fall, and I've been in Israel. Mm-hmm. And what I am seeing all over the globe, Allison, is wokeness is everywhere. It's not an American phenomenon. It is in all churches. It has infiltrated. And really what wokeness is, we know it's cultural Marxism, but really what it is, it's the whore of Babylon. Mm-hmm. And the whore of Babylon is forming the one world religion as we speak, which is trying to replace Christianity. And how it's doing that is 180ism. And the reason I call it 180ism is the whore of Babylon inverts what God says. So if God says something is right, the whore will say something is wrong. and vice versa. It's the Isaiah 5 passage. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. So it's permeated all over Christendom, and it's a major problem. And really, the answer is it's the whore of Babylon.
Wow, very interesting. So upsetting when you
Yeah,
really dig in and truly think about what's going on here. And to know this is happening globally, also
yeah.
very concerning. I think it all ties into that one world government you just mentioned. Switching gears ever so slightly, I want to talk about this story. A former Mexican lawmaker has now been convicted of gender-based political violence. Now, his crime was criticizing a man and current Mexican lawmaker who identifies as a transgender woman. But he is now also warning that the erosion of freedom of speech and religion has gone global, as you just talked about. And the same will soon pervade even here in the United States. Pastor Brandon, how much longer until we are just totally silenced here for speaking out and defending biblical norms for living?
Well, we're on a fast track, and let me tell you what's going on already. And like I said, I've been traveling to Western countries all over the planet, and they're already clamped down on free speech because now they're making a new category called hate speech. And that hate speech is if you disagree with LGBT or transgender or Black Lives Matter or whatever woke ideology they're promoting, that's considered hate speech. So disagreement now is hate speech.
Yeah.
And so I saw this in Australia, I saw this in England, and they say, Brandon, we just don't have the freedoms you have. When we say things against the LGBT or transgender, we can be fined, we can be put in jail, we can have our tax exempt status or whatever taken away. Now, here's the thing: what you have to understand, what everyone needs to realize. The World Economic Forum, the globalists, the UN, is putting out mandates for countries to adopt to start clamping down on free speech. They hate free speech. They absolutely hate our Bill of Rights. They hate our Constitution. And so what's coming down the pipe from the UN and the World Economic Forum is a new system that eliminates free speech and clamps down on things that you would say in your news broadcast, or what I would say from a biblical standpoint. And so that's coming. And think about this, Allison. From the World Economic Forum, their meetings in last January, what was their biggest threat, they said, of 2024? It was disinformation and misinformation.
Yep.
And that means truth. And they are threatened by the truth.
Yeah.
And so they're going to label that disinformation or misinformation or hate speech in order to clamp down on that. So that's what's coming. And I'm telling you, it's coming faster than most people think. I'm telling you, like a couple years from now, what you and I are saying will be hate speech.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue it already is. We've already seen multiple examples here in America of even journalists being jailed for their First Amendment right. It's so far out of control. And it's the most shocking part of it all to me is that the masses, the people who aren't paying attention, just haven't even bat an eye. They just don't even think that there's anything slightly off about what's going on. So important that we continue having these conversations in an effort to try and wake people up to the reality. We're not going to have much time left here, so it's really a pressing issue. And, ultimately, I think all of this is an effort to weaken us Christians, weaken white people. Obviously, there's an attack on white people, specifically the white male, who the elites know would be the main force against them in any future revolution, right? Make them subservient, sorrowful, weak, and agreeable to their new version of institutionalized oppression to right the wrongs of the past. I mean, how can regression into discrimination be anything but racist itself? Because I can't help but think about George Orwell's Animal Farm, where all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, right?
Right. Well, and you're mentioning a good tactic. That's what they're using. So the issue then, where does this white privilege come from? Where does all this come from? Well, it comes from a Marxist tactic. What the Marxists figured out in order to take down America was they couldn't use economic class warfare. So they had to go to race. And because America is the melting pot, or the West is the melting pot, that's the concept we work under. They had to disrupt that. And what they did is we're going to disrupt it through race. Now, they used white privilege or white racism or whatever they want to call it. But why did they do that? Because the West demographically is primarily white evangelical Christians. Okay. So if they're going to take down America, or they're going to take down the West, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, whatever, they have to attack the largest demographic that holds that view. So that's where they went after the white people. And that's where white privilege and all this other stuff is coming from. That's why the schools are promoting it. And basically, it's racism against white people in order to silence us, to not criticize and get the truth out about what's really happening, and to demonize us. And what you saw, like what happened in like Nazi Germany, if you demonize a particular group like they did the Jews, then you can make them a subhuman, and then you can take away rights from them. And then that leads from not only soft persecution to hard persecution, but then to physical persecution, which you saw. That's where it's going. And that's what people, I think, in the church need to be prepared for. A harder persecution is coming our way because of their targeting us. And really, what is the point? It's not to get rid of white people. It's to attack the Judeo-Christian ethic that we hold. That's what it is.
That is exactly what it is all about. I pray that people come to the realization that this is our very frightening reality and turn to Jesus before it is too late. Pastor Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today. We're all out of time, but I really appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Allison. Appreciate it.
God bless you.
For all our viewers asking where One America News is heading in the future, we would like to introduce you to OAN Live. OAN Live is the best way to stay up to date on all of the hard-hitting, straight-shooting, national and international headlines. And the best part is, OAN Live is only $4.99 per month. All the credible, honest, unbiased reporting One America News offers at a fraction of the cost of cable. Just go to OANN.com to easily sign up for OAN Live and stay informed.